السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. نحمده ونستعينه ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ به من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون. ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى: وإذا وقع القول عليهم أخرجنا لهم دابة من الأرض تكلمهم أن الناس كانوا بآياتنا لا يوقنون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. I begin this Jumma Khutba by asking us all to remember and to cultivate taqwa within ourselves. This constant consciousness of God, fear of God, presence of Him always in our minds and our hearts, so we are thinking of Him and what can we do to please Him and to stay away from all that displeases Him. We are approaching the midpoint of the month of Sha'ban, Nisfu Sha'ban, Muntasafu Sha'ban, and we will be inshallah commemorating the special day of Sha'ban for all of its virtues, particularly the birth of our 12th Imam, Imam Mahdi, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu al-sharif. So we have a day of lectures devoted to that tomorrow, inshallah, and then on Sunday also there's a program to commemorate his birth. Related to his memory, and it's kind of hard to say memory because so much of what we know about him is to come, but our awareness of him, there is an event that will take place at the end of times, and it is part of our core beliefs as followers of Ahlul Bayt, and it is one of those points that is a dividing point between Ahlul Sunnah and the followers of Ahlul Bayt. The events that will take place are under the title of the Raj'ah. Right? The Raj'ah, Ruju' means to come back. So this Raj'ah is the term that the Ahlul Bayt have used to refer to this series of events that will take place at the end of time. Part of the dunya still, not yet that the akhirah has started. It's before the blowing of the trumpet. At very least before the second blowing of the trumpet. Now we don't know if it's after the first blowing or exactly when it happens. All the details are also not exactly known to us. We have, let me tell you a little bit about what the Raj'ah is in general, and then I'll explain the significance of it. So the idea is that most likely at the end of Imam Mahdi's rule, after he has done what he's supposed to do, there will be a resurrection of certain people in the dunya itself. This is the Raj'ah. So we're not talking about the resurrection on the Day of Judgment. That resurrection is different. Everyone's resurrected at that point. And then there's judgment, and then all the sequence of events that leads to eternal heaven and hell. This is, the Raj'ah is still part of the dunya, right? Still part of the temporal world. It's somewhere between the end of Imam Mahdi's government and the blowing of the trumpets. That people will be resurrected, certain people will be resurrected, and we have a vast number of ahadith from the Ahlul Bayt describing this time. They describe who will be resurrected, what will happen during that time, and the ahadith are such that our ulama say that there is there's a term called tawatur. You might be familiar with this term, a hadith that's mutawatir. That's the term that we use for a hadith that is so widely and abundantly narrated by so many people that our mind makes the decision that there's no way this is made up. This must be true. It has to be true, because otherwise why would you have 100 different people narrating this thing? So Ghadir, for instance. The event of Ghadir is a very clear example of a hadith that's mutawatir. So like 70,000 people, up to 120,000 people witnessed it. And the reports from every generation of Muslims, right from the people who were eyewitnesses to their descendants, to the tabi'een and the tabi'een and so forth, all the way down, every generation, there's never been a bottleneck where, for instance, only one person heard it and then he told 1,000 people. Because then you could say, well, he might have made it up. How do we know he didn't make it up? Yeah, 1,000 people narrated after him, but if he was the only witness, then he's the critical link, and it all depends on his credibility. But here you have a public event, a public sermon be given by Rasulullah. So many people are present. And they all go tell the story to their family that we were there with the Prophet at Hajj. After Hajj, we went to Ghadir Khum, and this happened. He said this, he said that. He raised Amir al-Mu'mineen's hand up and said, Man kuntu mawla fa'aliyun mawla. So that's a clear example of a mutawatir hadith. Every single report, it may be variances of words here and there, but every single report says that this happened. Here's what the Prophet said. So there's no doubt for anyone, Sunni, Shi'i, anyone who has any knowledge of anything could ever say that this is false. It never took place. Without speaking falsely. There's no evidence for that. So the raj'a ahadith are mutawatir in a way, but not mutawatir in their words. It's not the same hadith that's being quoted over and over again. But there's what's called a tawatur ijmali. The basic idea, the fundamental idea, the basics of this raj'a are repeated over and over again in countless, maybe hundreds of hadith. At least dozens of hadith, if not hundreds. The details differ. Who is resurrected? What do they do? What's the time frame? Where do they come from? All the sequence of events, they're different. And you might even say they're contradictory. But the essential idea that there is a raj'a, there is a resurrection of people in the dunya, that it's different from the resurrection of people on the Day of Judgment, that it's not part of this dunya exactly either, like the regular dunya that we know of, where people are born and die. So that basic idea is very clear. And it's one of the fundamental beliefs of us as followers of Ahlul Bayt. Our ulama think of it as it's called a daruriyat, one of the daruriyat al-madhab. One of those things that is so clear that nobody doubts, nobody differs on amongst the ulama, that there's, for instance, some scholar who says, no, it's all made up, it's all false. Every single one of our scholars from the beginning of the ghaiba until now have affirmed that this is true. Without getting into the nitty-gritty of the details of those traditions, but the essential thing that this raj'a is there is true. And so it's one of those fundamental beliefs, alongside our belief in Allah and judgment and imamah and risala, that we are called on to believe in the reality of this thing called raj'a. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. One of the pieces of evidence that the Ahlul Bayt themselves use to assert that the raj'a is reality is a set of verses from Surah An-Naml. So I want to share these verses with you and the commentary of these verses, so we come to understand that this has a Quranic basis as well. It's not only through ahadith that we understand this, but the Quran also refers. And actually, there is one of our ulama from the, I would say, 11th century, Shaykh al-Hurr al-Amini. He's the author, the compiler of Wasa'il al-Shi'a. Massive compendium, 30 volumes now, of ahadith, something like 30,000 hadith. That's the fundamentals of our fiqh. Right, on which it sits down. This is the comprehensive collection of ahadith that gives him the sources for deriving laws. So that same author, al-Hurr al-Amini, has compiled a book called Al-Iqadh min al-Haj'a. It's kind of a tough name. Al-Iqadh min al-Haj'a, the awakening from the slumber. The awakening from slumber. And it's all about the raj'a. So he wrote one whole monograph, one whole book, kind of rationally arguing and collecting all the hadith about the raj'a, to show that this is something that's so widely narrated, and he does a marvelous job laying out everything, both ahadith, and then he gives commentary on those as well. So then one of the sections in his book also, he collects all the verses of Quran that ahadith have mentioned that have to do with raj'ah. So the first of those and the strongest of those verses from Quran that's connected to the raj'ah, that is about the raj'ah, are these verses from Surah An-Naml. All right? The verses begin, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإذا وقع القول عليهم أخرجنا لهم دابة من الأرض تكلمهم أن الناس كانوا بآياتنا لا يوقنون. When the decree falls upon them, إذا وقع القول, so there's some decree from Allah that is descending upon people. What we understand is it's the punishment or like some sort of thing that's occurring, some occurrence that's taking place because of God's decree. And when this happens, now whether this is the first blow of the trumpet, that's one possibility. So everyone else is killed, and then there's some people alive, and this dabbat min al-ard is resurrected. That's one possibility. But anyway, some punishment, something comes down on people. Who is it coming down upon? That pronoun refers to the Quraysh first and foremost, but not just the Quraysh who are now dead, but all the people in the ummah of Rasulullah. In the Quran, when it talks about the ummah of Rasulullah, the ummah includes anyone who is responsible for responding to the call of Rasulullah. Throughout history now, so everyone from the time of the bi'tha, right? From the time of the bi'tha until the end of time is in the ummah of Rasulullah, Muslim and non-Muslim. Right, we usually, nowadays, when we say ummah, the ummah of Muslims, we say ummah, we're talking about Muslims only. Right? But when the Quran uses the term ummah, that's like everyone's in the ummah of Rasulullah, what it means is all those people who are under the jurisdiction of Rasulullah, all who are responsible for answering his call, Muslim or non-Muslim. Right? So from the pagans of Mecca all the way till the last enemy that dies before the first trumpet blows, everyone, all of them are part of the ummah of the Prophet in this sense, in the Quranic sense. All right, so something happens, the decree of God descends upon them, then what does He do? أَخْرَجْنَا لَهُمْ دَابَّةً مِنَ الْأَرْضِ. Allah says that we bring forth for them a creature of the earth, or a creature from the earth. Right, this word dabba is used in the Quran for basically any kind of animal. يَدُبُّ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ means to crawl upon the earth. So it's used for horses, it's used for all sorts of cattle, it can be used for ants. In a hadith it's referred to the crawling of the ant as dabibul dabba. So anything that crawls on the earth, including human beings, we can also be called dabba in that sense. Like we say animal in English, sometimes we mean animal meaning non-human, but humans are also animals in a sense. We're one kind of animal. So it depends on the context whether we're included under animal or not. So dabba, typically it's used for non-human animals. But here, the fact that tukallimuhum, one of the characteristics that the Quran mentions for this dabbata min al-ard that's being brought forth, is that it's going to speak to them. Right? So something happens to the people, and as a result, or right after that, Allah brings forth this animal, this creature from the earth, which speaks to them, speaks to all those people. Why does He do this? He says, أَنَّ النَّاسَ كَانُوا بِآيَاتِنَا لَا يُوقِنُونَ. The reason why He does this is because these people were rebellious of the signs of God. We set them signs, which means verses, and scripture, which means all the signs of Allah in His creation, the aql that He's given us, everything that points us towards Allah is an ayah of Allah. These ayat were there with them, but they rejected them. They were kafir. And because they were kafir and mukadhib and rejecting of these signs, Allah now brings this creature from the earth that speaks to them. So it's veiled in mystery. There's no detail more than that in this verse. Nowhere else in the Quran does it have any mention of this dabbata min al-ard. Who is it? What is it? What kind of creature is it? There are ahadith that have very fantastical descriptions. And we have ahadith that tell us that this dabbatu min al-ard is Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. There's one incident where Rasulullah enters the masjid and Imam Ali is there with other people, and Rasulullah says, Assalamu alayka ya dabbat al-ard. Right? He uses the term of creature of the earth. He says, Assalamu alayka ya dabbat al-ard, speaking to Amir al-Mu'mineen. And so one of the other companions says, is this something new? Is this how we're supposed to greet one another? Coming to the masjid, says, Assalamu alayka ya dabbat al-ard, ya dabbat al-ard, you creature of the earth. And he says, no, this is only for this man. And then he says that he's the dabbatul ard that Allah is speaking about in Surah An-Naml. That creature, that person, that being that's going to be resurrected, that will speak to them, speak to the ones who denied the signs of God, and let them know that all those signs that you rejected are true. All the events and the realities that you rejected are true, is going to be none other than Amir al-Mu'mineen. That he will be the first, or one of the ones who is resurrected. It seems like the first who is resurrected in this raj'ah. He continues, وَيَوْمَ نَحْشُرُ مِنْ كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ فَوْجًا مِمَّا يُكَذِّبُ بِآيَاتِنَا فَهُمْ يُوزَعُونَ. On that day, we will resurrect, let's say, gather together. We'll do hashr, we'll gather together from every ummah, one kind of mob of people. Fawj, I know in Urdu and maybe in Farsi even, Fawj is typically used for an army. But that's not the Arabic meaning exactly. It can be also used for that, but Fawj simply means a mass of people, like a mob of people that's moving fast. Right? So think of like a mob that's going to riot or loot, or in the streets they're angry and they're moving. That's a Fawj. Not necessarily they're an army organized with weapons, but they're just a mass of people moving. And so Allah says that on this day, we will gather together, we will resurrect and gather together a group, a Fawj from every ummah. What is the attribute of this group that's being resurrected from every ummah? They were مِمَّن يُكَذِّبُ بِآيَاتِنَا. These are people who rejected our signs. Right? So he's not saying we're going to resurrect every person, every ummah. In this verse, he's talking about resurrecting a subset of every ummah. A Fawj, one mob of people from every ummah, and that is an evil group of people who rejected the signs of God. And they'll all be kind of gathered together. This فَهُمْ يُوزَعُونَ, the descriptions that they're now using for the people of Gaza and how they're trying to flee into Egypt, and they're erecting a huge wall to try to stop them. So from the one side they have the Israeli army, or the threat of the Israeli army coming in. One side they have a wall, they can't go forward. Now they're gathered together and they're all kind of trapped. That's what this فَهُمْ يُوزَعُونَ means. This mob of people, of rejectors of God's signs, will be gathered together. They're large numbers, and then they'll be these people will be stopped, and the other ones will start packing in until they're all crowded together in the small space, and now they're trapped. So this verse, you might say, well, it sounds like the Day of Judgment. The problem is on the Day of Judgment, there's no subset that's being singled out for resurrection. There's another verse in Surah Al-Kahf, and the Imam actually, in one hadith, he asks about this verse, or actually maybe somebody comes and asks him about this verse. What is this referring to? That one Fawj, one group of people from every ummah will be resurrected. What is it referring to? So the Imam turns it back on the question and says, what do people say about it? Like what's the word on the street about this verse? So the person says that everyone says it's about the Day of Judgment. So the Imam's response is, on the Day of Judgment, we don't have any sort of evidence that only one subset of people will be raised. The verse about the Day of Judgment is in Surah Al-Kahf, where he says, وَحَشَرْنَاهُمْ فَلَمْ نُغَادِرْ مِنْهُمْ أَحَدًا. We will resurrect them and we won't leave behind a single one of them. That's the Day of Judgment. There's no exceptions on the Day of Judgment. Everyone is resurrected. The best to the worst. The first ummah to the last ummah. Every single person is resurrected and brought back to life on the Day of Judgment. وَحَشَرْنَاهُمْ فَلَمْ نُغَادِرْ. Nughadir means natruk. We won't leave behind a single one of them in their graves. Every single person will be resurrected on the day of judgment. Whereas this verse is not saying every single person. It's saying from every ummah, one subgroup of people will be resurrected. Right? So the Imam also draws that distinction that this verse is not talking about the day of judgment. This is something different from that. حتى إذا جاءوا قال أكذبتم بآياتي ولم تحيطوا بها علما أم ماذا كنتم تعملون. So now these evil people, the subset of every ummah, so out of the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the group of people who rejected the signs will be brought forth. From the ummah of Isa, the same thing. From the ummah of Musa, the same thing. So every prophet's ummah, a subset of them will be brought forth. And now when they come, they're coming before Allah. Again, this is not day of judgment. This is still in the dunya, but they're being addressed by Allah, and He'll ask them, أَكَذَّبْتُمْ بِآيَاتِي. Did you reject my signs? وَلَمْ تُحِيطُوا بِهَا عِلْمًا. You rejected my signs despite not having knowledge of the truth or falsehood of them. There's one time when we reject something because we have evidence that it's false. Right? The evidence is pointing to the fact this is wrong. I have evidence against what you're saying, so if I reject it, no problem. I'm doing the right thing because I'm with the evidence. And then if there's new evidence, better evidence that trumps my old evidence, then I'll follow the new evidence. That's the right way. We should always be following the truth, following the evidence. And when the evidence is strong, then we follow it and say the evidence is all pointing to this direction, or the overwhelming evidence is pointing in this direction, so I follow wherever the evidence points me. That's the right attitude towards truth. But now what if I don't have evidence? It's not clear who's right, who's wrong, what's right, what's wrong. You have an argument, he has an argument, I can't figure out who's right. There's no evidence that's pointing me clearly towards one conclusion. The right stance there is not to say, well, there's no evidence, so I'm going to reject it. Right? That's the problem with atheism. An atheist position is a weak position. Logically, it's a weak position because they're saying, I don't believe in God. Why don't you believe in God? At most you can say because there's no evidence that there's God. Right? I can't find any tangible evidence that there's God. There's no reason for God. There's no need for God. So there's lack of evidence. The lack of evidence doesn't prove that the thing is untrue. The agnostic's position is a stronger logical position. The agnostic who says, I don't have enough evidence, so I don't know if there's God or not. That's at least a humble position. It's a good starting point. Now you have to keep on going to see what all evidence is there, what all evidence could there be. Let me evaluate the evidence that is there. But at least an agnostic is in a humble position where they're saying, I don't have evidence, so I'm not sure. But to say I don't have evidence, therefore there's no God, on what basis? عَدَمُ الدَّلِيلِ لَيْسَ دَلِيلًا عَلَى الْعَدَمِ. That's the Arabic kind of aphorism for that. The lack of evidence doesn't point to the falseness of something. So these people, Allah is chastising them and saying, أَكَذَّبْتُمْ بِآيَاتِ. You dared to reject my signs, وَلَمْ تُحِيطُوا بِهَا عِلْمًا. When you had no comprehensive knowledge of them. On what basis did you reject? At least shrug your shoulders and say, I don't know, show me more, tell me more, explain it to me. Why do you believe so strongly in this? Show me why. But here you have no evidence that it's wrong, that you rejected it anyway. أَمَّاذَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. You rejected it, that's the least of what you did. Maybe you even fought against it, maybe you even shed blood and kill people based on this ignorant position against truth. So He chastises them for that. وَوَقَعَ الْقَوْلُ عَلَيْهِمْ بِمَا ظَلَمُوا فَهُمْ لَا يَنْطِقُونَ. Again, another judgment of God, another decree of God comes down upon them, and somehow it's so overwhelming for them that they're left speechless. فَهُمْ لَا يَنْطِقُونَ. They're speechless, they don't know what to say. They have no excuse before God at that point, because what He's saying is clearly true, and their position that they've held throughout their existence is clearly weak and false. فَهُمْ لَا يَنْطِقُونَ. Then He says, أَلَمْ يَرَوْا أَنَّا جَعَلْنَا اللَّيْلَ لِيَسْكُنُوا فِيهِ وَالنَّهَارَ مُبْصِرًا إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يُؤْمِنُونَ. And in that same position, Allah speaking to this fawj, this subset of people, and He's asking them about one of the ayat. Right? The characteristic that He repeats in every verse is that they were يُكَذِّبُوا بِآيَاتِنَا. They were They were people who rejected the signs of God. So now he mentions one of those signs to them. Like, did they not see that we made the night for them to find peace, to find rest? Like, sukoon in the layl, in the night. وَالنَّهَارَ مُبْصِرًا, and we gave them night, bright, brilliant. Here he hasn't mentioned the work and the productive things you can do. In other verses, وَجَعَلْنَا النَّهَارَ مَعَاشًا, for instance. We gave you the day as the time frame for you to go about your livelihood and your business and whatever you do. The night's there as a libas, as a maskan, a place for you to find peace and tranquility, recharge yourself. So this itself is a blessing, a sign of Allah that He's given us a night and a day cycle which is in tune with our needs of rest and work, rest and productivity. So this itself is one of the signs. And one of our commentators, Allama Tabatabai, he mentions that there's another sign in this, that in the darkness of the night, when you don't know where to go, the best thing is to stay still and sleep. Right? In the day, when there's light and you can see where to go, then you choose and you say, I'm going to go here or go there and do this and do that. And it's an example for these people because their position, remember, was that in ignorance, they rejected it. They took a position. It's like it's dark, pitch dark in here, and I want to make a beeline for something. Like, I can't see where I'm going. Going with confidence, going in this direction and say I'm going to go to the door, and I can't even see where the door is. I don't know if I'm going to the door or I'm going to hit a wall because it's pitch dark. The best thing is just to stay still. Just relax, take some rest, and then when the light comes out or someone turns the light on or I can figure out how to turn the light on, then I can see where I'm supposed to go and what I'm supposed to do. Now I can take a position. Right? That was their problem. They were in ignorance, in dhulma, in darkness and ignorance about the signs of God, but they took a position in that darkness and said, we reject them. I have no evidence that it's right, so I'm going to say it's false. Well, why? Wait until the light comes on. Wait until you can ask someone who knows. Wait until you can think about it a little bit and evaluate it with humility and see, does it make sense or not make sense? Does it point me towards God or does it point me to the fact that God doesn't exist and He hasn't done anything for me? First, open your eyes, wait for the light, and then take a position. Don't take a position in the darkness. I thought it was a very beautiful way to see two benefits of this sign that Allah is reminding them of. One is that it's a blessing that you had in the dunya that you should have appreciated. This is my creation that I gave you night and day, that is in tune with your needs. As my role as Rabb, I gave you this blessing. Appreciate that, and you get closer to me. All right, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Let me share one more verse with you. For those who came in later, we're talking about the raj'ah. This raj'ah is one of the fundamental beliefs of the Shia that the Ahlul Bayt guide us towards. And this is one of the verses from Surah An-Naml that the Ahlul Bayt have used as evidence for the existence of this raj'ah. That after this regular dunya is over, but before Qiyamah starts, there's going to be some resurrection. The first of which is this أَخْرَجْنَا لَهُمْ دَابَّةً مِنَ الْأَرْضِ. That the verse mentions that we're going to resurrect, we're going to bring forth this creature from the earth who's going to speak to them. Speak to those who rejected the signs of God and show them that you're wrong and you should have believed when you had the chance. The last verse I'll share with you, it goes on a bit longer, but the last verse is وَيَوْمَ يُنْفَخُ فِي الصُّورِ فَفَزِعَ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ. So it goes on. If you look at the sequence of the verses, let me give you some context. This belief in raj'ah is something particular to the followers of Ahlul Bayt. Those who abandoned Ahlul Bayt after Saqifa, they never figured any of this out. This is not something the verse is not very clear. The verse alone, it just leaves you it's like a riddle. You don't know exactly what it's referring to. Maybe it's referring to Qiyamah, maybe not. And if you're not looking at all the clues or looking for the clues, if you don't have the hints that Ahlul Bayt have given us, then it's really hard to see it. And so you'll see Sunni commentators, they will reject this. They'll again take a stance against the raj'ah. Why? Because there's no evidence. There's no evidence in their hadith that they've gotten through the khulafa and through the other companions who are loyal to the khulafa. But from the Ahlul Bayt, we have a plethora of ahadith that guide us to this meaning and this reality that will happen. And once you understand, sometimes you look at an optical illusion, what are those image things? You kind of look at it, you blur your eyes a little bit, then you can see it. Right? Before you see it, you can't see it. Once you see it, it's obvious. Right? Once you know what you're looking for, then it's like, oh, of course, why didn't I see it to begin with? So many times when we're looking at the verse, everyone's reading the same verse, but we're not sure what it's saying. But then once the Ahlul Bayt come and say, well, it's referring to this, look at this clue, look at that, and they point us in the direction, they're like, oh, now I see it, now it's clear. Now I understand what the verse is talking about. All we needed was that little hint, that little clue to push us in the right direction, and then we can fill in the blanks. So the Ahlul Bayt have put a finger on this verse, and one of the things that you can look at in the sequence of these verses is that he's talking about those events of that dabbatu min al-ard coming forth, being brought forth, that conversation and that fauj, that group of people being resurrected and being spoken to by God, and then he mentions the blowing of the trumpet. The blowing of the trumpet, it's not clear if it's the second trumpet or the first trumpet in this verse, because some of the events he mentions, some of them are appropriate for the first trumpet blow. Because he mentions, for instance, وَتَرَى الْجِبَالَ تَحْسَبُهَا جَامِدَةً وَهِيَ تَمُرُّ مَرَّ السَّحَابِ. The first blow of the trumpet, of Israfil's trumpet, what is its job? It's to destroy everything. Kill everyone who's still alive, level the mountains, and make everything flat. Destroy the dunya. That's what the first trumpet does. Then the second trumpet, when it's blown, now everyone is resurrected. So it says, يَوْمَ يُنْفَخُ فِي الصُّورِ, on that day when the trumpet will be blown, but then some of the things that he mentions in description of what happens afterwards are things that will take place after the first blow of the trumpet. You see these mountains, you think that they're so solid. Look at Mount Everest, look at these huge mountains, they're so solid. وَهِيَ تَمُرُّ مَرَّ السَّحَابِ. On that day, they're gonna swish around like clouds. Right? Think of the huge clouds, those huge cumulus clouds that look like they're solid like a mountain, and you look at it 2 minutes later and they're blown this way and that, and there's almost like liquid being blown around by the wind. That's how you'll see these mountains being blown this way and that. That's the first trumpet blow that will cause that kind of stuff to happen. But then he also mentions things that will happen when يُنْفَخُ فِي الصُّورِ فَفَزِعَ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ إِلَّا مَنْ شَاءَ اللَّهِ. People will feel terror. Everyone on earth will feel terror at the trumpet's blow. Well, they must be alive. It's not killing them. It's being blown, and then they feel terror. This must be the second trumpet blow where everyone's being resurrected. And now it's called hawlul muttala. That's the way it's referred to in ahadith. Hawl with a ha, not a ha. Hawlul muttala. Hawl is this terror, utter terror in your heart, because you've now kind of risen out of your grave and you're looking around and you're in complete, utter terror. You don't know what's happening. You're naked. Everyone else is naked. Everyone's rising out of their graves. You've been in your grave for you don't know how long. And now that first terror that overcomes you is called hawlul muttala. We have du'as that say, Allah, protect me from hawlul muttala. Protect me from that fear. Don't make me of those who feel fear on that day. But the verse says, when that trumpet is blown, everyone on earth, in the heavens and the earth will feel faza'. Faza' is this terror also, like hawl. Illa man sha Allah, except for some people. And who are those some people? A few verses later, he tells us, Man ja'a bil hasanati falahu khayrun minha wa hum min faza'in yawma idhin aminun. Those people who did good, on that day, they will be safe from that terror. They won't have to be subjected to that terror of that day, of the trumpet blowing. All right, so we don't have much time to go through much detail, but let me recap what I'm talking about. So we're talking about this raj'ah, which is this event that will take place. This series of verses mentions things that when you look at the whole series and you see that it's the sequence in which it's talking about things, it's talking about a resurrection of a subset of people who are evil that happens before the trumpet's even blown, before people are resurrected from their graves for Judgment Day. It's not the resurrection of all people that it's talking about. The resurrection of all people happens after the trumpet is blown. But the resurrection of some subset of people, and this dabbatu min al-ard, that's this one creature from the earth that's raised and talks to them and tells them why they're wrong, that's happening before the trumpet is blown. So the Imams put a finger on this verse, on this set of verses, and say this is not talking about Qiyamah. This is talking about the raj'ah. A resurrection of some people in the dunya. For what purpose? Ahadith tell us. And who is resurrected? Some ahadith tell us. Some ahadith tell us, they name people. Amir al-Mu'mineen, it seems like very clear that he's going to be the one. He's Dabbatul al-Ard in this verse. Rasulullah identifies him as Dabbatul al-Ard. So ahadith are very clear. He's one of the ones, maybe the first one, who is definitely going to be resurrected in this raj'ah. Ahadith mention Imam Hussein also. And then others are mentioned here and there. So we're not sure exactly who out of the Ahlul Bayt, who out of the prophets of old. But we're told in some ahadith that people who are pure good and people who are pure evil will be resurrected. This verse is mentioning people who are pure evil. يَوْمَ نَحْشُرُ مِنْ كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ فَوْجًا مِمَّا يُكَذِّبُ بِآيَاتِنَا. These people who are mukaththib and rejectors of the signs of God, they will be resurrected. The verse doesn't mention the people on the good side. But ahadith, it fill in the blanks and tell us that this dabbat min al-ard will be there and others. So one idea, one of the things that's mentioned in ahadith is the whole purpose of this resurrection of these people in the dunya is to finally settle the score. To allow those people who were pure good, who had lived and died fighting for truth, but never saw the truth vanquish falsehood. They never saw the victory of truth until they died. So Allah wants to resurrect them to allow them to have the satisfaction of finally fighting and defeating the forces of falsehood. And so they resurrect, select people from the armies of falsehood, select people from the armies of good, and let them have at it, and the outcome is guaranteed. These will beat those. But He wants them, this is part of their reward, it's the first of their reward before judgment even takes place, and it's part of the punishment of the other ones. Of course, they'll have their eternal punishment in hellfire, but He wants them to taste that punishment. He wants justice to be done. He wants the truth to be victorious over falsehood right here in the dunya as well. So this is an important part of our beliefs, our theology, something that is spoken of by our ma'sumin, something that our ulama are in consensus about, that this is something that will happen. The details, we don't know so much about which one is true, but it could also be like many of the details of even Qiyamah in the Quran are also difficult to piece together. Some verses say nobody can talk, some verses say some people can talk, some verses say there's no shafa'ah, some verses say there is shafa'ah. Some verses says, they put one sequence, others says another sequence. So putting all those verses together, figuring out which one, what's the sequence, what's the difference, why is this saying yes, this saying no, that's a very tough thing. It doesn't mean that one verse is right and one verse is wrong, it's just that there's a sequence of events. At one point nobody talks, at another point some people talk. It's rejecting some kinds of shafa'ah, it's affirming other kinds of shafa'ah. Rejecting shafa'ah by some people and accepting shafa'ah of other people. So figuring out what are the caveats that are involved in having all of these be true is quite a tough job. And the same goes for these ahadith. And because ahadith are inherently less certain, we don't know for certain that all of them are true, then it's like putting together a huge puzzle and you don't even know if you have all the pieces. You don't even know if all the pieces are really part of the puzzle, or some of the extra pieces someone's thrown in. You don't even know what the picture is supposed to be at the end. Like that kind of a challenge, you're trying to put this kind of million-piece puzzle together with so many uncertainties. So it's very tough to know with certainty what the details are. But the fact that you have a puzzle and you can kind of figure out what the basic where the corners are, right? That's there at least. You have the corners of the puzzle, that's good. You have a start. Now filling in the rest of it is very, very tough. And we may never be able to do it until either Imam Hujjah, if he wants to explain it to us, he will. Otherwise, when we live to see the day, or resurrected on that day, then we will see it for ourselves. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar fasalli li rabbika wanhar inna shani'aka huwa al-abtar. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdu wa thana lillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashraf al-anbiya Muhammad wa ala ahli baytihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Allahumma salli ala محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد ابن عبد الله. اللهم صل على فاطمة الزهراء وعلى علي أمير المؤمنين وعلى الحسن والحسين وعلي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن القائم المهدي صلوات الله عليهم أجمعين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. All praises for Allah, and we call down His mercy and His blessings on Rasulullah and on His Ahlul Bayt. Once again, I admonish all of us to cultivate taqwa within ourselves. We have a door that's always open to us of tawbah that we should always avail ourselves of continuously, whether or not we have a specific sin in mind. Tawbah and istighfar should be our constant state. So inshallah, as we commemorate these next few days, the special and kind of spiritual opportunity that the 15th of Sha'ban provides for us, we also are going to remember Imam al-Hujjah, salamullahi alayhi. Now we have another piece of the puzzle, this raj'ah, which is also linked to the Imam's time. Perhaps it follows his time. Maybe he's also part of that. We don't know exactly the details of whether he will participate in this raj'ah or it'll be after his time. But this is an important part of our beliefs and we should reconnect with it. The verses again are in Surah An-Naml, and it starts with verse 82 and goes to about 95, I think. So it's towards the end of Surah An-Naml. Look at those verses and inshallah reconnect with this belief in the raj'ah. Allah, we ask you to shower your mercy and blessings on Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. Allah, we ask you to forgive all the believers, male and female, alive and dead, and help us to avail ourselves with the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt and the Quran, and especially on these days, accept all of our a'mal and forgive us for all of our sins. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Qul huwa Allahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad, wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.